The week he never left day zero, Ren woke up to the smell of instant noodles and the sound of a key rattling in a lock that hadn't existed in 10 years. For a second, he thought he was dreaming. Then his eyes adjusted to the water stain on the ceiling, the one shaped like a rabbit, the one he used to stare at during finals week while pretending to study, and something cold dropped through his stomach and kept falling. This was room 214, his old dorm room, the one he hadn't set foot in since the June he turned 22. He sat up too fast, and the world tilted with him, the cracked desk lamp, the borrowed guitar leaning in the corner, the calendar tacked crookedly to the wall with a red circle drawn around a date that made his throat close. Sunday, departure. The door opened without a knock because it never needed one. "You're still in bed." Yifan stood in the doorway in yesterday's t-shirt, hair a disaster, holding 2 cups of the noodles that had apparently been breakfast, lunch, and dinner for both of them since sophomore year. "We have exactly 6 days left to be irresponsible together, and you're wasting daylight." Ren's mouth opened. Nothing came out, because Yifan was not supposed to be standing there. Yifan was supposed to be 40 minutes away by car, in an apartment Ren had visited exactly twice, married to a man named Theo, sending Ren a cheerful holiday card every December that Ren always meant to respond to and never did. Yifan was supposed to be a decade away. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Yifan said, setting a cup on the desk and dropping onto the end of the bed like gravity had personally invited him. "Rough dream?" Ren looked at him, 22 years old, unfairly alive, unfairly here, and felt 10 years of carefully organized silence come apart at the seams. "Yeah," he managed. "Something like that." He didn't tell Yifan the truth, because the truth was insane. "I am 32 years old. I flew back to this city for a work conference I don't even remember agreeing to attend. I walked past our old building on a whim. And now it's the week you left me, and I am living it again, and I don't know why, and I don't know how long I get, and I have exactly 6 days before you get on that plane, and I have to watch myself fail to say the one thing I never said." He didn't tell him that. He picked up the noodles instead because some cowardices are just muscle memory. "So," Yifan said, watching him with the particular attention he'd always paid Ren and nobody else, "what do you want to do with your last week of freedom?" "I want to tell you I love you before you get on that plane," Ren thought. "I want to have told you 3 years ago. I want to not be a person who lets the important things sit in his chest until they calcify." "Get breakfast that isn't noodles," is what he said. Yifan grinned like Ren had said something clever, and Ren filed the grin away the way he filed everything about Yifan away, carefully, permanently, uselessly, and thought. 6 days. He had no idea yet that he would live this particular 6 days more times than he could count. Loop 1, the airport speech the first time, Ren tried to do it right. He spent 4 of the 6 days working up to it, quietly, deliberately, the way he approached everything that mattered to him, which was to say like a project with a deadline. He rehearsed in the shower. He rehearsed on the walk to class. By Saturday night, he had a version of the truth polished into something he thought sounded brave instead of terrified. He decided the airport was the move, cinematic, undeniable, the kind of gesture that couldn't be laughed off or misread. Sunday came the way Sundays do when you're dreading them, too fast, and somehow also unbearably slow. Ren stood at the gate with his heart trying to climb out through his teeth, and when Yifan turned around for one last goodbye hug, Ren blurted it out exactly the way he'd practiced. "I'm in love with you. I have been for years. I should have said it before now, and I'm sorry I didn't, and I don't expect anything. I needed you to know before you left." The words landed in the space between them like something dropped from a height. Yifan's face did 3 things in quick succession. Shock, something that might have been panic, and then, worst of all, gentleness. The kind of gentleness people use on things they're about to set down carefully and walk away from. "Ren," his voice was soft in a way that hurt more than anger would have. "I didn't know. I'm God, I wish you told me sooner. I wish I had more time to—" The boarding call cut him off. Yifan looked at the gate, then back at Ren, torn in half by a timeline neither of them controlled. "I have to go," he said, and it sounded like an apology for more than just the flight. "Can we talk? When I land, can we—" "Yeah," Ren said, because what else was there to say to a closing door? "Sure." He watched Yifan disappear down the jet bridge, and he stood there long after the plane had surely taken off, feeling like he'd finally done the brave thing and somehow still lost. Then the terminal blinked. Not flickered, blinked, the way a screen does when it reboots, a half-second of static swallowing the world. Ren opened his eyes to the water-stained ceiling of room 214, the smell of instant noodles thick in the air, and the door rattling open on a key that shouldn't exist. "You're still in bed," Yifan said. "We have exactly 6 days left to be irresponsible together." Ren sat frozen, noodles from a version of Sunday that had apparently unhappened cooling somewhere he could no longer reach. Again he thought, and something in him that had been braced for relief instead braced for war. Loop 2. The party if honesty at the airport hadn't worked, Ren decided, maybe honesty needed an audience. Somewhere warm and loud, where the words could ride in on momentum instead of standing there naked and alone. There was a going-away party on the Friday of every loop. Their whole floor crowded into someone's room with a speaker too loud for the space, and a folding table of cheap liquor. Ren had never been much of a drinker, but this time he let himself have just enough to loosen the vice around his ribs, and when the party thinned out to just the two of them on the fire escape at 2 a.m., he thought, "Now, can I tell you something?" he said, watching Yifan's profile against the orange smear of streetlight, "and you promise not to make it weird." "I make everything weird," Yifan said. "It's my one talent. I'm serious." Something in his tone made Yifan actually turn and look at him, really look, the way he did when he sensed Ren was about to say something he'd normally swallow. "Okay," Yifan said. "I'm listening." Ren opened his mouth, and the words came out slurred at the edges, less careful than the airport version, Rower. "I don't want you to go without knowing that I love you. I think I've loved you since sophomore year. Since the blackout during finals week when you made shadow puppets on the wall until I stopped being scared." And for one suspended second he thought this was it. This was the version that worked, because Yifan's eyes had gone very wide and very bright. Then Yifan laughed, not cruelly, helplessly, the too much laugh of someone caught completely off guard, trying to cover the fact that he didn't know what his face was doing. "You're drunk," he said, but it came out like a question. "A little. Doesn't make it less true." "Ren," Yifan rubbed a hand over his face. I don't want our last real conversation to be one neither of us fully remembers tomorrow. Can we talk about this sober? Before I leave?" "There won't be a tomorrow that connects to tonight," Ren thought, with the particular despair of someone who already knew how this went. "There's only ever this loop and Sunday, and then it all resets." "Yeah," he said instead, mouth full of ash. "Sure." They never got the sober conversation. Sunday arrived with its terrible gravity, the goodbye hug, the taxi, the blink of static swallowing the terminal, and Ren woke up to instant noodles and a rattling key. 6 days restored, nothing spent. Nothing learned that the loop would let him keep except what lived in his own memory. Loop 3, the letter he tried subtlety next, on the theory that maybe the problem was the delivery, not the message. He wrote it all down, 3 drafts, then a 4th that finally sounded like him instead of a stranger performing sincerity, and slipped it into the front pocket of Yifan's carry-on the morning of departure. Timed so Yifan wouldn't find it until he was already in the air, already unreachable, already past the point where Ren's face could betray him. Coward's move, he thought, folding the paper. At least it's an honest coward's move. He spent that Sunday in a strange, hollow calm, having already said his piece without having to watch it land. He hugged Yifan goodbye like normal. He waved at the gate like normal. He went back to the dorm and sat on his bed and waited for the blink of static, thinking, this is the one. This has to be the one. The terminal never called him back this time. Instead, 3 hours later, his phone rang. Yifan's voice was thick, wrecked, torn between wonder and hurt. "You couldn't say this to my face? Ren, I read this 4 times. I read this and then I read it again because I couldn't believe you'd let me get on a plane without. Why didn't you tell me? Why now? Why like this?" "I don't know," Ren admitted, and it was the truest thing he'd said in any version of this week. "I've never known how to say the things that matter until it's too late to say them right." There was a long silence on the line, full of static and altitude and 10,000 feet of distance already opening between them. "I have to think," Yifan finally said. I need to call you back, okay? I promise I'll call you back." He never got the chance. The world blinked. The static swallowed the phone call, the plane, the promise, and Ren opened his eyes to the ceiling and the noodles and the key in the door, and for the first time since this had started, he didn't sit up right away. He lay there and let himself feel, fully, how much it cost to lose a conversation he'd never get to finish, over and over. A version of grief with no bottom, because nothing he did seem to stick. Loop 4, giving up by the 5th or 6th time, he'd stopped counting exactly, the loops blurring into a smear of the same 6 days. Ren tried something new. Nothing at all. If honesty didn't work, if timing didn't work, if a letter written with his whole chest didn't work, then maybe the answer was to stop trying to force a door that wasn't going to open. He spent that loop the way he probably should have spent it the first time around, 10 years ago, just being with Yifan. No confession, no agenda, watching bad movies, arguing about whose turn it was to do dishes in a kitchen that hadn't been theirs to share for years. Losing, badly, at the card game Yifan had taught him in freshman year, and never let him forget he was terrible at. It should have felt like a relief. Instead, it felt like drowning slowly instead of all at once. Sunday came anyway. The goodbye hug came anyway, ordinary and warm and utterly insufficient. Yifan pulled back, studied Ren's face for a second too long, and said almost gently, "You've been weird all week. Good weird, different, you okay?" "I'm working on it," Ren said, which was infuriatingly still true. "Well," Yifan's smile flickered, uncertain, like he could feel something unfinished in the air and didn't know its shape. "Call me when I land?" "Yeah," Ren said for what felt like the 1,000th time. "Sure." The plane took off. The terminal blinked. Ren surfaced in room 214 with the taste of noodles in his mouth and a new, unwelcome certainty rising in his chest. It didn't matter what he tried. Confess or don't, drunk or sober, spoken or written, the loop reset regardless. Whatever was keeping him here, it wasn't waiting on the right sentence. Which meant, he realized with the sick lurch of a puzzle piece turning the right way for the first time, that he'd been solving the wrong problem the entire time. The turn he spent the next loop differently. Not performing honesty, not withholding it either, just paying attention, for once, to something other than the sentence he'd built his whole week around. He noticed things he'd apparently spent 10 real years and half a dozen loops too distracted to notice. That Yifan hummed off-key while he cooked, always the same 3 bars of some song neither of them could name. That he left his shoes untied out of pure defiant laziness, and somehow never tripped. That his going-away jokes got sharper and faster the closer Sunday came. A kind of armor Ren recognized instantly because he wore the same kind, just quieter. On Wednesday, instead of rehearsing a confession in his head, Ren said something truer and smaller. "I'm scared you're going to leave, and I'm never going to say the things I should have said years ago." Yifan went still over the pot he was stirring. "What things?" "I don't know yet," Ren admitted. "I think I've spent so long being careful about how I say things that I forgot to just say them. Any of them. I pulled away from you junior year and I never told you why. I've been doing that my whole life, pulling away first so it doesn't feel like losing when other people leave." Yifan turned the burner off, didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, "I always thought I did something, junior year. I never figured out what." "You didn't do anything." Ren's voice cracked, unrehearsed, unpolished, nothing like the airport speech or the party confession or the careful letter. "That's the problem. You didn't do anything and I still ran, because staying close felt like a bigger risk than losing them slowly on purpose." Yifan crossed the kitchen, and for the first time in any version of this week, didn't say anything clever at all. He just sat down across from Ren, close enough that their knees touched, and waited. "I'm not saying this because you're leaving Sunday," Ren said. "I'm saying it because I should have said something like it years ago, and I don't want to run out of chances to just be honest with you. About anything, not just the big thing." "Okay," Yifan said quietly. "I'm here, whatever the big thing is, whenever you're ready. I'm not going anywhere before Sunday." It wasn't a confession. It wasn't the sentence Ren had spent 5 loops trying to engineer into perfection. It was smaller and messier, and it felt, for the first time, like the truth instead of a performance of it. Sunday still came. The goodbye still happened. But this time, when Yifan pulled back from the hug, he held on to Ren's shoulders a second longer than usual and said, "Whatever the big thing is, it can wait until I land. I'm not going to forget you asked me to wait." The terminal blinked. Room 214, noodles, the key in the door. But this time, lying there in the gray early light, Ren didn't feel despair. He felt, for the first time since this whole impossible week had started over and over, something closer to clarity. The last loop he didn't rehearse anything this time. He spent the 6 days the way he should have spent them the very first time around, badly organized, fully present, saying the smaller true things as they came instead of hoarding them for one perfect moment that didn't exist. He told Yifan he was proud of him for taking the job, even though it terrified him. He told him he still thought about the blackout during finals week, the shadow puppets on the wall, more than he'd ever admitted. He apologized, really apologized, not performed it, for junior year, for every small retreat since, for a decade of choosing distance because distance felt safer than a maybe. By Saturday night, sitting on the same fire escape where the drunk confession had gone sideways in another loop, there was no liquor, no rehearsed speech, Nothing but two people who'd run out of things to hide. "Can I ask you something?" Yifan said, watching the same streetlight smear orange across the same fire escape, the whole scene achingly familiar and different all at once. "This week you've been different, not bad different. Just like you finally stopped holding your breath around me." "I have been holding my breath around you," Ren said, "for years. I think I've been scared that if I ever said the real thing, out loud, in one sentence, it would be too big to take back and too small to be enough at the same time." "So don't say it in one sentence," Yifan said, quiet, careful, like he already half knew where this was going, and wanted to give Ren room to get there in his own time. "Say it the way you've been saying everything else this week, however it comes out." Ren looked at him, at the off-key humming and the untied shoes, and the jokes that were armor and the gentleness underneath the armor that had always, somehow, been aimed at Ren specifically. And for the first time, he wasn't building toward a line. He was just talking. "I think I've loved you since the blackout. I think I've loved you through every stupid card game and every bad movie and every year I pulled away instead of getting closer. And I think the reason none of my attempts at telling you this ever felt right isn't because I picked the wrong airport or the wrong party or the wrong words. It's because I was trying to hand you a finished thing instead of just letting you see me. All the unfinished, scared, ordinary parts of it too." Yifan didn't laugh this time. Didn't go still with shock or reach for gentle deflection or promise a conversation for later. He just reached over, slow enough that Ren could have pulled away and didn't, and laced their fingers together on the cold metal grating. "I always wondered," Yifan said softly, "if there was something under all that careful. I just didn't think you'd ever let me see it." "I almost didn't. I'm glad you did." Yifan's thumb moved once gently over Ren's knuckles. "For what it's worth, I don't think I need the perfect sentence either. I think I just needed this, whatever this is, however long we get." They sat there a long time, not saying anything else because for once nothing else needed saying. Sunday came the way it always did. At the gate, the goodbye was different, not smaller, not bigger, just real, no performance underneath it, no line Ren was building toward. Yifan held on a beat longer than the loop had ever let him before, and murmured against Ren's ear, 10 years, 10 weeks, 10 days. Whatever this turns into, I want to find out. Call me when I land and actually mean it this time." "I mean it," Ren said. "I always meant it. I just never said the rest of it out loud." The terminal blinked. But when Ren opened his eyes, it wasn't room 214. Epilogue, 10 years later he woke up in a hotel room, city noise humming faintly through the window. A half-finished conference itinerary on the nightstand and 32 real years pressing back into his bones. The loop was over. Whether it had ever truly happened, or whether some exhausted, grieving corner of his mind had built the whole thing out of a decade of things unsaid, Ren didn't know, and some nights he suspected he never would. What he did know was this: he hadn't called Yifan in 3 years. Not since a stiff, polite exchange at a mutual friend's wedding, both of them older and careful, and pretending the space between them was just distance, not something either of them had chosen. He sat on the edge of the hotel bed for a long time, phone in his hand, thumb hovering over a name he hadn't dialed in years. He thought about 6 days spent trying to build the perfect sentence. He thought about how none of them had ever been the point. Not the airport, not the party, not the letter, not even, really, the fire escape. The point had never been finding the right words to hand someone else. The point had been letting someone see him without the performance wrapped around it. Something he could still do. Something it wasn't too late to do, even now, even having wasted the version of it that came free. He didn't have a script this time. No polished speech, no rehearsed line, no engineered moment. He just pressed call, and when Yifan picked up, surprised, wary, a decade of silence audible in the pause before he said Ren. Like the name itself was a question, Ren didn't reach for anything perfect. He just started talking, however it came out, the end.